My name is Tessa Harlow, and I'm 32 years old. It was a Friday evening in February when I felt something go wrong inside my body. Not wrong like a pulled muscle or a headache you push through, but wrong in the way that makes you go very still and think, something is ending. I had been at my desk all afternoon finishing a report for work, barely moving, barely eating. Around 4 o'clock, I felt a tightness in my chest that I kept telling myself was stress. I drank water. I stood up and stretched. I told myself it was the cold air coming through the window I'd cracked open that morning. By 6 o'clock, I was sweating through my shirt and my left arm felt like it had fallen asleep and wouldn't wake up. I want to be honest about what happened next, because I know some people will hear it and think it was foolish. Maybe it was. But when your body is doing something that terrifies you, your first instinct isn't always the rational one. Your first instinct is to reach for someone familiar, someone who is supposed to be yours. I called my husband. He didn't answer. I called again. Voicemail. I texted, I don't feel right. Something's wrong with my chest and my arm. I watched the little ticks go to delivered and then to read. He read it. And then nothing. I called my mother-in-law. Nothing. I called my sister-in-law, Bree, who lived 20 minutes away. Her phone rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message because by that point, I was sitting on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet, and I wasn't sure I could form words properly. What I did not do, and I've thought about this 1,000 times since, is call 911 immediately. I understand now why I should have, but I need you to understand what it feels like to be in that moment. Your chest is being pressed in by something invisible. Your thoughts are thick and slow. You are afraid, not in the way you're afraid of a scary movie, but in the way you are afraid when you realize the ground under you isn't solid. I had been married for 6 years. I had built a life inside a family that I believed, even then, despite everything, would come if I needed them. I was still trying to believe that. I called my husband 11 more times over 22 minutes. 13 calls total. I know the exact number because the paramedics showed me my phone log afterward. The person who saved my life was not my husband. It was not anyone from the family I had married into. It was a woman named June Asher. June was 63 years old, and she lived in the unit directly above mine in our building in Hamilton, Ontario. We had exchanged maybe 40 words in 2 years. She knew my name. I knew she had a small dog named Copper who scratched at the floor sometimes in the mornings. That was the entire scope of our relationship. June later told me that she had come downstairs to ask if anyone had seen a package she was expecting. She knocked on my door because my lights were on. When nobody answered but she heard something, a sound she described as someone trying to breathe very carefully, deliberately. Like breathing had become a task that required concentration, she called 911. The paramedics told me afterward that I had experienced a cardiac event. I was 32 years old. They said the timeline mattered enormously. They said if June had not made that call when she did, they could not have told me with confidence that the outcome would have been what it was. What it was that I survived. I was in the cardiac unit at St. Joseph's Healthcare for 4 days. I had a procedure. I had monitoring. I had nurses who checked on me every hour through the first night, and I remember lying in that bed in the dark, listening to the machines and thinking, very clearly, with a kind of calm that surprised me. Nobody came. My husband arrived at the hospital at 11:30 that night. I had been there since 7. His explanation, delivered at the foot of my bed while I was still in a hospital gown, with electrodes on my chest, was that he had been at his brother's place watching the game, and his phone had been in his jacket in the other room. He said he hadn't seen my messages until his brother's wife mentioned. She'd seen a missed call from him on her husband's phone, and they'd put it together. He had been there for 4 hours with his phone in another room, while I was texting him that something was wrong with my chest. He said he was sorry. He reached for my hand, and I let him take it because I didn't have the strength for anything else right then. The next morning, his mother came. I want to describe this carefully because I want to be accurate. She walked into my room, looked around it the way you look around a hotel room you're not sure you want to stay in, and said she hoped I was feeling better. Then she sat down and spent approximately 12 minutes talking about the fact that the family was supposed to go to Collingwood that weekend for my brother-in-law's 40th birthday celebration, and that the reservation at the inn had already been paid for, and she really hoped this wouldn't disrupt things too much. I looked at her from my hospital bed, the day after a cardiac event, and I said as evenly as I could manage, I just had a heart attack. She said, well, the doctor said it was a cardiac event, not technically. And I stopped listening. What I didn't know yet, what I was still in the process of finding out, was the thing that changed everything. On my second day in hospital, a nurse came in to check my vitals around mid-morning and mentioned, almost as an aside, that a woman had come by earlier. Not family, she said. An older woman who asked to leave something at the nursing station. The nurse handed me a small paper bag. Inside was a crossword puzzle book, a package of those individually wrapped shortbread cookies from a bakery I recognized on Lock Street, and a handwritten note on a card with a red cardinal on the front. The note said, "I hope they're taking good care of you. Copper sends his regards. June 4B." I held that card for a long time. Later that afternoon, I was told that the man who had spoken with the paramedics the night I was brought in, a man who had been in the lobby of the building when the ambulance arrived, had been asking the nursing station for updates on my condition. They couldn't share details, of course, but the ward clerk told me he'd come twice, and that he'd left his name and number in case anyone needed to reach him. The name was Robert Asher, June's husband. I didn't know what to do with that information. I had never properly met him. I knew he existed the way you know your neighbors exist, as a set of sounds and a silhouette sometimes visible through a frosted glass door. He came to see me on my third day. June was with him. They knocked softly and stood in the doorway and asked if they could come in. He was a tall man, early 70s, the kind of person who moves carefully and speaks slowly, not because he's unsure of himself, but because he thinks before he opens his mouth. He had reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, and he was wearing a flannel shirt and carrying a coffee from Tim Hortons, which he set on the windowsill next to the get well card from my own mother that had arrived by email, digitally. She had sent me a digital card from a website while I was in the cardiac unit. Robert sat down and he said, "I just wanted to make sure you were all right." That was it. That was the whole sentence. Something about the plainness of it broke something open in me. I had spent 3 days watching my husband manage me, watching his family frame my hospitalization as an inconvenience, watching my own mother send a card from her laptop, and here was this man, this complete stranger, sitting in an uncomfortable hospital chair with a Tim Hortons coffee, because he just wanted to make sure I was all right. I thanked him. He waved it off the way people do when they've done something that felt obvious to them. He said June had been worried. He said they both were. He asked if I had family coming to help when I was discharged. I told him yes. My husband was handling it. Something passed across his face. He didn't say anything. June reached over and put her hand over mine on the blanket. What I found out later, much later, and not from Robert himself, was what he had actually done the night I was brought in. He had been in the lobby because he and June had come back from dinner. He saw the ambulance. He followed to find out what had happened. And when he heard the paramedics say the unit number, he recognized it as the apartment below June's. He stayed in the lobby, waiting, because he said it didn't seem right to just go upstairs while someone was being taken out on a stretcher. When my husband arrived at 11:30 that night, 4 hours after me, Robert was apparently still in the lobby. My husband, and I have since confirmed this from the concierge who was on shift, walked past the board in the lobby where the paramedics had signed in, clocked that it was my unit number, and took the elevator up. He didn't ask anyone what happened. He didn't speak to the paramedics. He went directly to the parking garage afterward to move his car to a proper spot because he'd parked in visitor. Robert apparently watched all of this happen. I don't know what Robert thought in that moment. I only know what he did next. He went to the hospital the following morning. He spoke with someone in the patient relations office. He explained, calmly and in detail, that a tenant in his building had been brought in by ambulance the previous evening, that the emergency contacts had been reached, but had not arrived for several hours, and that he wanted to make sure someone was aware of the situation in case it was relevant to the patient's care or safety planning for discharge. He filed a report, quietly, without telling me. I found this out from a social worker who came to see me on my 4th day before discharge. She said she'd received a note from patient relations about my situation and wanted to check in. She asked about my home environment, my support system, whether I felt safe going back. She asked these questions gently but directly, and I sat there realizing that some stranger, some quiet man with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, had made sure that somebody official was paying attention. I cried in a way that I hadn't let myself cry the entire time I was in the hospital. Going home was strange. My husband had cleaned the kitchen, which I noticed immediately because he never cleans the kitchen. He had bought flowers, the grocery store bouquet kind, with the plastic wrapping still on, and put them in a vase he'd filled with too much water. I stood in the doorway of my own apartment and felt like a guest in someone else's recovery. He made dinner that night. He asked how I was feeling every hour or so. He was trying. I could see that he was trying, and I want to be fair about that, because this story is not about hating him. It's about understanding something. 6 years. We had been together for 6 years, and the version of himself he was showing me in those days after I came home, the attentive one, the one who cooked and cleaned and asked every hour, that was not who he was when he didn't need to perform. I knew that. I had always known that. I had just chosen, over and over again, to file it away under he's working on it, and every marriage goes through phases, and I'm too sensitive sometimes. His mother called 3 days after I was home to let me know that the Collingwood weekend had been rescheduled to March, and she hoped I would be well enough by then to join them. I told her I would see how I felt. She said she had found a lovely inn with a spa, so that should be a nice incentive for me to get my strength back. I sat with the phone in my hand for a while after that call ended. What June and Robert did over the following weeks was simple, and it's hard to explain why it hit me as hard as it did. June knocked on my door every 2 days or so, never for long. She'd bring something small, a container of soup she'd made, a magazine, once a library book she thought I might like based on, as she put it, nothing except instinct. She'd stay 15 minutes, 20 at most. She never asked about my husband. She never offered opinions about my life. She just showed up, quietly and consistently, and then she went back upstairs. Robert fixed my door handle one afternoon because he noticed it was sticking when he passed in the hallway. He just knocked and said, "I've got a few minutes if you want me to take a look at that." And when I said I didn't want to bother him, he said, "I'm bothering you. You just have to let me." I laughed for the first time since the hospital. My own family, for the record. My mother sent a follow-up email with a link to a heart-healthy meal plan. My father called once, said scary stuff, "Glad you're okay," and then spent most of the call telling me about a problem he was having with his pension paperwork. My closest friend growing up, a woman I had known since we were 8 years old, texted me, "I'm so scary, glad you're okay," with 3 heart emojis, and then went quiet. I am not saying these things to wound anyone. I'm saying them because I want you to understand the gap. The gap between what people say they would do in a crisis and what they actually do. And the gap between what I expected from strangers, which was nothing, and what June and Robert actually gave, which was everything that mattered. My marriage did not survive. I want to say that plainly. It didn't end in a single dramatic moment. It ended the way I imagine a lot of marriages end, slowly, and then all at once, and with more paperwork than you'd think. What I know is that lying in that hospital bed, watching my husband move through the room with the particular energy of someone doing damage control, I saw clearly something I had been declining to see for years. When it mattered most, when the choice was between his comfort and my survival, he chose his comfort. And then he came when it was safe to come, and he managed the aftermath with flowers and a clean kitchen, and he expected me to be grateful. And for a long time I had been. I filed the separation papers in April. I found a family lawyer through the Law Society Referral Service, which is a free referral program in Ontario. And the first call was 30 minutes at no charge. I say this because when you're going through something like this, the practical information is as important as anything else, and nobody tells you where to start. You start there. Robert and June attended my going-away gathering in June when I moved to a smaller place closer to work in the east end of the city. It was just a few people from my building, the friend from the 3rd floor I'd gotten to know over the years, the building super who'd always been kind. June brought a lemon cake. Robert gave me a card that said, on the inside in his careful handwriting, "Onwards, you've already done the hardest part." I have that card on my refrigerator. I think about who June was in my life at the moment I needed her most. Which is to say, she was nobody. We were strangers. She came downstairs about a package and she heard something that didn't sound right, and she picked up her phone. That's all, and because of that, I'm here. And I think about Robert, who saw a situation and did not look away from it. Who stayed in a lobby at 11:30 at night because it didn't seem right to just go upstairs. Who filed a quiet report with patient relations not because he wanted credit, but because he thought someone should know. Who fixed a sticky door handle because he had a few minutes and it needed to be done. Neither of them ever once made me feel like I owed them anything. They made me feel like being looked after was simply what people do for each other, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I had to lose almost everything, and nearly lose my life, to find out what it felt like to be genuinely seen by another person. And I found it in the people one floor up who barely knew my name. There's a quote I've been thinking about a lot lately, something I heard someone say once that I'm probably butchering slightly. We don't get to choose the family we're born into, but we do get to choose the family we build. I'm 32 years old. I came very close to not getting to build anything else. And now I'm building it, carefully, with the people who showed me what it looks like to actually show up. If you've ever been in that position, lying somewhere frightened, waiting for someone to come, and hearing silence, I want you to know that the silence doesn't mean you don't matter. Sometimes it just means you haven't yet found the people who will answer. They exist. I promise you, they exist. And sometimes they live one floor up and they have a small dog named Copper, and they knock on your door about a package, and they end up saving your life. If this story stayed with you, if it brought up something real, please consider subscribing to this channel. Every week we share stories like this one. Stories of survival, of unexpected kindness, of people finding their way through the moments that could have ended them. Real stories, told honestly, because they deserve to be heard. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and know that you're part of something that believes these stories matter. This one is for everyone who called out and heard nothing. You are not alone, and you are not forgotten.